In Nehemiah chapter 2, we had read last week Nehemiah chapter 1, how he heard about the broken down walls of Jerusalem and the gates that had been burned, and how the Jews who had returned from captivity were suffering. And Nehemiah broke down, mourned, confessed sins, his own sins and their sins, and prayed unto God. He said he fasted many days. He didn't even count how many days. He waited on the Lord and mourned. Now, in chapter 2, from verse 1 to verse 8. Let's just go to chapter 1 briefly, verse 1. It says, the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah, and it came to pass in the month Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Shushan, the palace. Note that month Chislev. I think in our own calendar, it would be like, December, somewhere around December. Now, I'm drawing this because in verse 1 of chapter 2, it says, and it came to pass in the month Nisan. So definitely one thing is for sure. They are not the same months. That these things, the next event he's talking about did not happen in the month that he fasted. Now, from Jewish calendar and our own calendar, the month Nisan would be somewhere around April. So we're talking of a 4-month span after the fast. He says, and it came to pass in the month Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes, the king, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Wherefore the king said unto me, why is thy countenance sad, seeing thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of heart. Then I was very sore afraid. Let's pause. Why do you think he was so afraid? Because don't forget, he was the king's wine bearer. He was the one who would drink the wine before he gives to the king. Normally, you better be of a good countenance, of a cheerful countenance, because if you are of sorrowful countenance, the king would think that you have actually poisoned that drink, and you are giving him poisoned drink. So that was why he was afraid that, this man is noticing that I'm of a sad countenance. Verse 3, and said unto the king, let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad, when the city, the place of my father's sepulchres, lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? Before he could mention his problems to the king, what did he first of all do? He went to God. Do you see the process, the procedure? First of all, go and discuss with God before we start talking to men. In verse 4, then the king said unto me, for what dost thou make request? Because you see, in those days, you don't go and make a request from a king. The king is the one to ask you, what do you want? So now the king is asking him, so what are you making a request for? So I prayed to the God of heaven. He prayed again. And then now this is where a short prayer is effectual. Why? Because you have had your long prayer, you have had your fasting where? In private. Do you understand now? So now a short prayer in public, you will get what you are looking for. But you didn't pray in private, you now want to make a short prayer in public. You're wasting your time. So verse 5 again. And I said unto the king, if it please the king, and if thy servant have found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto the city of my father's sepulchre, that I may build it. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him, for how long shall thy journey be? And when wilt thou return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. Praise the name of the Lord. What a result. One man fasted and prayed when nobody was watching, when nobody was looking, having heard the state of Jerusalem. He's standing before the king, and the king is saying, for what do you make request? Let me know your request. And he makes a request. And the king is now saying, how long do you want to stay? Normally they would have told him, you can't go more than 1 week. How long do you want to stay? When are you going to return? He said, and I set him a time. He's the one setting time. This is where we see the efficacy of the fast. Not the one that we are boasting. This fellow had settled matters with God in private. And now we see the manifestation in public. In verse 7. Moreover, I said unto the king, if it please the king, let letters be given me to the governors beyond the river, that they may convey me over till I come into Judah, and a letter unto Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the palace, which appertained to the house, and for the wall of the city, and for the house that I shall enter into. And the king granted me according to the good hand of my God upon. This is what we mean by the power of a fast. Somebody fasted in December and it did not happen until April. Let me tell you something. Fasting is not a mechanical thing like we read last week in the Amplified. It can never be mechanical. Fasting is dynamic and it is a matter of faith. If you have fasted before the Lord, genuinely mourned for sin, rent your heart before God, contrite and humble before the Lord, know for a certainty that that which you have requested of the Lord will surely come to pass. It may take some time, but it will surely come to pass. And at that time, all things will work together for good. In the book of Esther, we see a similar thing. We know the story, how Haman had obtained permission from the king